emergency management plan. All right. With that, I think at this time we plan to possibly open it up to any questions as we enter in discussion.
Mayor, let me just say that apart from factual statements in response to questions or statements of general policy, your discussion will be limited to the emergency item.
Thank you, John. John, do we have any folks on that are wanting to ask any questions?
No questions received at this point in time.
Okay. Well, that will be available through the remainder of the meeting, and if those are there, we'll come back to those. With that, do we have discussion, or Joe, do you want to put out any more with that? So.
No, sir. In your agenda packets, you'll see the disaster declaration by the mayor of the city of Canyon, Gary Henders. I will highlight that we believe the only other time in Canyon history in the last 50 years that this possibly could have happened would have been the flood of 1978. We are unclear if there was a disaster at that time. That may have actually predated some of the disaster declaration items in our statutes. So, in essence, this could be our first ever declared disaster. Being that said, we met last week on Wednesday night with our counterpart, City of Amarillo, Randall County, and Potter County. At that point in time, we instituted a disaster declaration by your order, Mr. Mayor Henders. At that point in time, the declaration was good for 7 days. Before those 7 days, the City Commission would have to ratify that declaration by your authority. And that is why we are here today. Each commissioner can see the original disaster declaration in your agenda packet. Everything in here is standard language. All 4 agencies signed at the same time to be universal with one another. But at this time, at the recommendation of our city attorney and your city manager, we are recommending to ratify the previous disaster. In addition, we are wanting to declare the same disaster to be in conjunction with the governor's declared disaster, as well as the president's disaster. The resolution as it reads would be pursuant to a continual declared disaster in conjunction with the same timeline of the governor's disaster. So if the governor were to end the disaster declaration, ours would end at the same time. Is that correct, Chuck?
That is correct. The mayor had, along with the other local officials who signed the disaster declaration, had specific statutory authority under Chapter 418 of the Government Code to execute that. But as the city manager pointed out, that declaration unilaterally executed by the presiding officer of the political subdivision was only good for 7 days without commission approval. So effectively what we're doing is, by commission action, the proposed resolution would extend that for the duration of the disaster as declared by the Texas governor. That is correctly stated by the city manager.
The mayor of Canyon serves in the similar like as the governor would at the state level. He's the emergency management officiate for our city in that regard. We do have our emergency management director, which is Chip Orton with Amarillo area of Office of Emergency Management. We will continue to have coordination with them, but you as the mayor will serve in that role. If you are absent, the mayor pro tem will serve in that role. So that's pretty much what I've got here. We did add some information. If we do need to go out and do public purchasing, we would have an emergency power to be able to be exempt from competitive bidding if such had to occur. At this point in time, we do not know of that being an issue at this point.
I don't believe it is. We just included that as out of abundance of caution in case it was needed. And From a legal standpoint, the mayor or mayor pro tem will serve as a point of contact for the state. Obviously, the city manager, under the direction of the commission, will put together an emergency management team or incident command team, whatever that's going to be called, to do the actual day-to-day operations. But the mayor or mayor pro tem will serve as a point of contact for the city of Kenyon between the state of Texas.
Correct. And we've already actually had some of that happen. As the mayor and mayor pro tem know, we have had several communications with the governor and his office over the last 2 weeks. And I know there's even been communication with the President of the United States and some of his staff in regards to this pandemic as well. So that goes exactly to what Chuck was indicating. So the city of Kenyon have been very active in the communications with the governor's office and working in conjunction with his staff. So if anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer those at this time. But as city manager, and I would recommend that we pass this resolution declaring and continuing our disaster declaration.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we ratify the declaration of disaster order of March 18th, 2020, and further continue that declaration order in conjunction with the Office of Governor Abbott's disaster declaration.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for ratification. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. With that, takes us to item number 5, update from City Manager Joe Price on steps being taken by city staff regarding COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have been very proactive over the last 2 weeks, to say the least, with this pandemic. Several of y'all would have seen some of my emails going out. We have already gone ahead and taken some facility closing procedures. As you know, today you entered the building into a closed facility. Right now, staff is reporting and just working behind closed doors. I have handed those procedures out for your viewing purposes, but y'all should have gotten those earlier this weekend. We have put those also out on social media and informed our local media outlets. So we have tried to get that communication out as much as possible. Also with you, which you have not seen yet, is we are expecting in the near future to go to status red and possibly having a self-quarantine either by the governor or by the President of the United States in the near and immediate future. I don't think really anybody knows when that will be. However, we had an indication that could be Sunday at 3. With the press conference that the governor had, he did not make that decision at that time. We don't know yet, unfortunately, when that will be, because we are at the mercy of the governor and his staff to make that determination. But nonetheless, the city of Kenyon and Kenyon staff are ready to go once that happens. And so I've laid in front of you some city shutdown procedures that was prepared by city management on Sunday night. And so obviously public safety will be in full-fledged going on still, but we will be limiting staff in other areas, and those we literally have gone through each department and instructed what will happen. We will have to go into skeleton crews at times, and we will have to repurpose some staff that is currently not performing all their job duties because of the closures. So we have already working towards that. I had an emergency directors meeting yesterday at 2 o'clock right before the press conference, just in case that order came down from the governor's office. Like I said, it did not. However, we have gone over the shutdown procedures with the directors and key personnel here at the City of Kenyon. Everybody appears to be ready to go. So if y'all want to take a look at those real quick, I would be happy to answer any questions about those internal logistics. I will reassure you, people will continue to be paid, and part-time and full-time, we will continue to do that.
So if we go to Code Red, how does that look different than what we're doing now?
If we go to Code Red, pretty much everything on this list will be our changes. City management staff will continue to come in. Facilities, they do a lot of our cleaning. We'll still have them a lot to try to make sure our buildings are secure but also clean. We're looking at sanitization procedures coming, and we're going to go into that here in a little bit, so I'll go more into that. But each department has been affected and will change. So city attorney's office, Chuck works at his own office, he'll be good. City engineer, a lot of his projects will be put on hold, and so we'll continue to work on some of those. City secretary will be probably working from home, as well as doing assistance with public communications. Judge in court will be reduced caseload. Judge Swan is already working on that, doing a lot of that via teleconference. I'm not sure what service they're using. Finances, we have a couple down there from home right now. We'll continue to limit their staffing. Human resources, skeleton crew, but as many people as we can to work from home. And in the other areas where we can, we're going to do just pure basic maintenance. So for parks, they'll have basic maintenance, and so we may repurpose some of them. I've already started repurposing some of the library staff. I asked Andrea High, one of our librarians, to step into an interim role today as a public information officer. We are trying to get a lot more proactive on social media. I wish we could be more proactive. Unfortunately, we have a full plate, and so I need some assistance from other staff members. They have been extremely excited about, where there's a need, fill the need. And so I've got several stepping up to the plate during this time of disaster to do what needs to be done for the greater good of our community. And so we're taking those kinds of steps, Commissioner Ray, to move people around to those areas. Once we get into the disaster aspect, in regards to tracking cost and tracking staff time, which we have going to track our staff time every day, starting Wednesday from when the disaster was declared. Misty will be instantly overwhelmed with that aspect and human resources, so we'll need to shift some personnel over there to help her with those timesheets and help those calculated. We're actively trying to see where people are traveling to. We are extremely discouraging that. We sent out a second email today about that. Those that do not contend to follow and do continue to travel, there obviously will be a 14-day quarantine on their own time. But those are just a brief amount of steps that we will be taking to repurpose certain staff members. So we're going to try to use everybody we can. Yes, Chuck.
I want to fill in one thing on the municipal court activities. All dockets have been postponed to mid-April, and the Office of Court Administration of the State of Texas has made the Zoom service available to municipal courts. So we are utilizing Zoom service for hearings until the disaster declaration is lifted, at no cost to the city of Canyon.
Obviously, the word adaptability is probably our best friend right now, because that's exactly what we're doing. Any other questions?
Joe, I'm really glad to hear what you all are doing on social media and just communication, because that's just so important right now. And so, I think we've got both ends of the spectrum. Obviously we've been trying to communicate, the proper steps as far as social distancing or hygiene and what we need there. But I can see things as far as encouraging folks. We're allowing you to use the parks, we're allowing you to use the golf course, but as part of that, we need you to social distance, do the right things so we can keep those open. It's still wise to keep those open. So I think as people know and we get the word out, I think, that's great on that end. But then also on the end to encourage them to support our local, restaurants to the extent that we can through carry out or drive up. So anyway, I'm excited might be the wrong term right now, but I really feel good that you all are going down that road.
I think, that's a good thing is, in these times of struggle, I think coming together as a community, this is what makes Canyon unique. This is what makes our place unique, is we're coming together as neighbors, as friends, as companions, to support our fellow man in every way, including our local businesses. I don't think I need to tell anybody in this room, but tourism, local business has taken a major impact. And so if we can do anything we can to support our businesses in town, you know, we need them and they need us, and we want to show that mutual benefit. And I applaud the Chamber and the Restaurant Association for stepping up to do a lot of that. So I think we're coming together and we're collaborating, and that's what we need to do in these times.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, I also applaud the Chamber and stepped up even, you know, starting last week to go down this road. And you know, I think we can put other things out there, you know, such as use of gift certificates. You know, we can go ahead and make purchases, or even some purchases that might be for a birthday 6 months from now, but we can go ahead and support some folks in the meantime. And I think we as leaders can step up to, you know, show that example, and I think we can put that out there on social media and all too, what some of us are doing to help make a difference here too. So.
Anybody have any other questions about internal procedures? I think that's all I got, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. All right, item number 6, update on creation of Incident Management Team, IMT, City of Canyon.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have started the incident management team process. I thought it was best to make Interim Fire Chief Vince Whitfield our IMT commander. And we also have Dave Hoff here, who's a retired firefighter out of Colorado with extensive years of experience in these matters. And so these gentlemen are here today to talk a little bit about our IMT. Obviously, this is new to a lot of people in here, so I've asked to Dave to try to give us at least a foundation of what the IMT structure is and why we do it. So at that, I will turn it over to Mr. Hall.
Vince has a handout for you briefly that comes from the U.S. Fire Administration, an overview of incident management teams. I'm sure that you've probably all heard of incident management teams. Nationally, there is a number of them. I believe there are 16 Type 1 incident management teams, and it spreads down from there. Each state has several Type 3 teams. Colorado, I believe, has 3. Texas may have 5 or 6 Type 3 incident teams. And basically what that covers is their scope and their abilities and the size of the team. So basically where incident management teams came up, if I've got all this history correctly, is 2 things. And first, it was from the wildfires that happened in California 20-25 years ago. What it used to be is you had all these fire departments around Los Angeles. There might have been 50 of them. There might have been 100 of them. And they'd have one of these big wildland fires, and they'd all go out and fight the fires. Well, nobody was in charge of anything. People got hurt, it cost extra money, and it was a huge risk to people, and it wasn't very efficient. So going along those lines, that's how you've ended up with the Los Angeles County now is 1 fire department. They took about, I don't know, I've heard as many as 100 fire departments and threw them together under 1 basically fire department. And now you also have something called CAL FIRE, which is the state wildfire fire department for the state of California. When that happened, what they did is they went under a single incident management system. They have 1 chief. They have you know, everything flows from 1 direction. So that was sort of in the wildland setting, and they've been the leaders as far as incident management. Second thing that happened, of course, was 9/11, when you've heard about police couldn't talk to Port Authority couldn't talk to fire department, nobody could talk to anybody, and nobody was in charge. So following that, FEMA and the federal government started funding incident management training for cities, counties, basically anybody that wanted to do it. You could have your own exercise. They would help you pay for it. They would advise you. Sort of like the bus thing we did out at the United Center a couple of years ago. If you follow their parameters, and this translates all the way down to things like mass shootings in malls and things like that. The idea is that the federal government isn't the one that necessarily has to respond to all these disasters or large-scale incidents, that they would like the local authorities to do it, local being state, county, and some of those are pretty big entities, but nonetheless, it's not looking to the federal government to do everything. So what we did here is establish our own incident management team for the purpose of supporting the city of Canyon during this COVID response. And it looks like it was probably a good thing to do regarding what happened with the city of Amarillo. We thought we were kind of just gonna fold in with them, and apparently we're not. And so we decided, or the chief and Joe decided, we're gonna establish our own incident management team, which we have done. And basically the premise behind an incident management team is the authority stems from one person. And that can be any person. It doesn't necessarily have to be a firefighter or a police officer or even a city manager. But there has to be one person who is in charge, who will make the final shots. They'll say, yes, we're going to do this. No, we're not going to do this. And somebody that sets the incident priorities. So it's a hierarchy. You have an incident manager, otherwise known as an IC, okay? And underneath that, you have officers that will support him. In this case, Vince is the IC, Joe is the PIO. Joe didn't want to be in position of the IC. He has enough to do, which I firmly believe, but he still is the single point of contact with outside agencies. He is the city official. Now he may appoint somebody to take that for him, but it relies with him. If somebody really wants to know the final, what's the situation, they have to get it from Joe. And that's for obvious reasons. One of the bad things when you have an incident like this is people getting information from everywhere. We see it every day in the newspaper and on television. So basically what you've got is that, and underneath that, you've got pre-designated roles and responsibilities. So instead of a task coming up and saying, well, who wants to do that? Or, hey, Bill, why don't you do that? Or do you have time to do that? We already have that lined out. So as far as operations, we have Chief Whitfield and Ray Resendez, who are in charge of actually what I would call our emergency responses. And the purpose for having two people is that we need to know, both the city and the police, what our situations are. For instance, if the city gets 3 or 4 officers that go down, and I understand there's just one right now, everybody should know that, what the status is. Likewise, the city should know if we get down 3 or 4 firefighters. So we have somebody that's in charge of that at that time. It's a pre-designated task. These are your roles, and these are your responsibilities. So, and basically, if you look at the 3rd page of that handout, you'll see a skeleton ICS structure. Ours goes much deeper than that. You've got operations. I'm in charge of planning, and underneath planning, we've got such things like the resource unit leader, somebody who knows how many resources we have in terms of personal protection, masks, gloves, cleaning, sanitation supplies, how many there are, and where they're located for easy access. So we designated Garrett Simpson from the fire department to do that. We have somebody who's going to do some mapping as far as our high-risk areas for all the nursing homes or group homes or anything like that. So we already know if things get really, really bad, where our priorities may shift to. And that's basically what this whole thing boils down to. It's scalar. You can make it as big as you want, as small as you want, but the point is it's all in place before you need it, so you don't end up scrambling. It's the same thing as the sheriff's department and everybody else planning for these mass shooters. If it's not in place ahead of time, you'll fail when the time comes. Now, the one caveat to all this is, even though it came from NWCG, the wildfire group, they're termed all hazards. Now, a friend of mine was an ops section chief on a type 1 incident management team. He went to a number of very, very large wildfires, up to 800,000 acres. He also went to Iowa on a huge flood, was working on the space shuttle debris recovery in Texas, and the Homestead hurricane in Florida. So in essence, it's a management tool. It doesn't necessarily, it wouldn't make any difference if Cody's a ops section chief on a flood, if he's never ever lived near a lake. The point is he knows how to manage the people. The people underneath are the ones that you put that's where you put the experts. Just as one example, Joel Wright, he's in charge of finance. That's his thing. He puts people underneath him that can track time and all of that stuff. So the main thing is a management tool, so that if you get 100 people, like let's say we folded in with Randall County or they folded in with us or whatever, the structure is still in place and you have one person making the call as to what we do, especially prioritization, so we don't compete for our resources. If you can imagine this, and I think somebody even mentioned it here, you could make an order for something because that's what you usually do, but what Randy doesn't know is that Cody just ordered the same stuff because that's what he usually does, and now given the shortage of things out there, we're in essence competing for our own resources. The other thing you lose, of course, is the ability to track it. And down the line, maybe years down the line, somebody's going to say, hey, what do we owe you? Well, they're going to want to know, they're going to want to see it. So if I go on a single resource as a wildland firefighter, and I go out there, they want my qualifications, they want my times, they want all that stuff, and then they'll pay for it. If it's not done by their books, then there's a good chance that you're not going to get it.
We need that for reimbursement from the federal government.
Right. And probably some of that will come down the pipe. It reaches as far as things like communications, which was a big deal after 9/11. We've got that now. We've got numerous radio channels that we can use and that we can talk on. And it goes all the way down into the tasks, like for instance, one of them is our medical plan. What do we do? What does the fire department do if we know we have 2 people that were exposed? What do we do with them right then and there? We have a plan to isolate them up in the upstairs of Station 1. A plan to support them, how to go about getting them screened and all that. So that's in place ahead of time. So the question is, what does the city have? What do the police have for their officers? Well, apparently they're going to be sent home immediately, and then the screening process will take place from there. My only question would be, would they got a family? Is there a more secure place or someplace they should go at least temporarily for the short period of time until we get our mechanism going, so we can say, okay, well, was this truly an exposure? Where are we going with that? So things like that. So basically, what you don't have to do is invent stuff on the fly. So basically, that's an incident management team, and the idea is, at least in my vision, and I think with the size of the city and the capabilities and the support that we have, we should be able to function without, assistance for a period of time, whatever we decide that is, whatever you all decide that is. If it's a week, if it's 2 weeks, which seems to be pretty likely to me, and that's the time frame they're using, kind of federal government. Well, we're going to close this for 2 weeks, we're going to do this for 2 weeks. So that seems to be in line with that. But we should have enough resources to be able to self-supporting, because although you can say, well, Amarillo's going to do it, Amarillo's going to do it, or anybody else. The problem is when they're in the situation, it's only natural you get left out in the cold, or we'll get to you when we can. So.
Well, and let me throw out there, excuse me, I think Amarillo is working to work with us, and I hear what you're saying.
Right.
But I want to throw that out. I think they are working very well with us too, and part of that's communication. So.
Right, and exactly, and we now have, at least this plan has a single point of contact up there, which is Chip. Chip came down and talked to us today, and so that line of communication is open. The question would be is, what can they do for us if necessary, and what could we do for ourselves? So that's what we're trying to ascertain right now. This plan's going to be a living document. It's going to
We'll
evolve over
continue
time.
to have, our commander will be at their operational
Right.
meetings.
So. That's about all there is. So the terms that they use: IMT, Incident Management Team; ICS, Incident Command Structure, or Incident Command System. That's the actual chart that you will often see. And we kind of do this sometimes on the 4th of July, things like that. Okay, who's in charge of everything? Who's medical? Who's law enforcement? Who's whatever? So, I hope that gives just a little bit of basic in what this is. This is going to go out on VOG, so everybody can see all the forms, can see the structure, can see the assignments that are coming from Joe or wherever they're coming from, and look at that and see it in front of them. And it'll change from day to day, but hope that kind of clears up what the system is anyway.
We've got a POC room that's our emergency management software with Emerald, and so we have our own room, and a lot of our directors and key staff are in there, so it's one message goes to everyone. So, you know, if Dave says something, everybody sees it. If I say something, everybody sees it. So it's a clear path. I'll go over some tasks that we're looking at right now, just so we're brief. We are in the process of looking at sanitization of city facilities and reaching out to private contractors on that to do as best we can to limit the exposure of this pandemic. So,
Joe, will that include parks too?
we have not decided on parks right now. That will be probably pretty costly with a small duration. So once we sanitize it, it'll probably last 48 to 72 hours. We have mentioned that about parks. I know John Burns and Brian Knoll talked a little bit about that on the play set. We haven't had any fruits of that. We've just looked at it to see if that's antibacterial. John, is that correct? Yes. So we are still looking at that for like play sets.
Right.
Unsure if we will be able to get to that. So another one we're looking at, some of the things Dave said, we're looking at our inventory list. We'll have one person looking at inventory of cleaning supplies, hand sanitizer, gloves, eye protection, PPEs, and each of these will be assigned to certain people. And so we are looking at who to assign these to at the present time. We're going to look at schedule of cleaning, frequency, locations. We'll assign that task. As I said, HR will have, we've already sent out, everybody will have to do daily timesheets, myself included. Those will have to come in each next day. So obviously that's going to take up a lot of time and resource. We're going to look at people staff who's traveled out of town. You know, do we need a quarantine? Who's currently quarantined? We're going to look at doing a daily post with our PIO, doing a post about supporting businesses and general best practices tips for the coronavirus. We'll have weekly contact with our health authority, Dr. Gross, here in town. So we had a meeting with him the other day. At least every other day we intend to hit with Canyon ISD and West Texas A&M to continue to communicate with them. So these are some of the tasks that we're putting in place. You know, those are what I'd like to call the foundation to build the house and to start moving upward. So we need to get all this down and start working down the path of getting ready. So, and the commander will be in charge once we have all these tasks. He'll put durations and time limits on, hey, you need to have this by that day, you need to have this by this day. And he'll be the one that's tasked with making sure these things are oriented effectively in a timely manner. Other than that, so I got this all started on Saturday night, or Saturday morning. So this is kind of what we've got since that time. Hopefully we'll have a lot of this locked down probably by tonight or early tomorrow. We are working with Amarillo in regards to the IMT and getting some suggestions on some of the tasks, and so we are actively working with them. We've talked to them 2 or 3 times today. Everything's going great. You know, there's obviously specific needs to Canyon that don't apply to Amarillo. There's obviously specific needs to Amarillo that don't apply to Canyon. And so we are the best people to know those needs, and you know, they are supporting us through those roles. And if we can do anything to support them, we will do so. So everything has been going great, and I think we're going good. I wish we were a little further ahead, but I still don't think we're behind.
And Joe, I know there was a conference call this morning, Chip Horton and Amarillo area Office of Emergency Management, and really, you know, strong coordination there between Granville County, Amarillo, both school districts, WT, you know, along with, you know, interesting questions from Atmos and all too. So, you know, a lot of different angles being looked at and considered, and so really coordinated effort
Yeah,
there too.
I think
So-
that we gotta continue to collaborate like that.
Agreed.
At this time, that's all I have for y'all.
Any other questions there? Or?
Main point is we're trying to centralize the way we do things. One-stop shop.
Good deal.
I think it's really impressive with a city our size that can stand up an IMT team in that amount of time with qualified personnel. Just understanding that business pretty well, that's pretty impressive. It really is. Thanks, Vince. You did a good job.
We've got great people here, and these great people are what make this happen. I'm very appreciative for this staff and coming together in this time of need, especially on their days off. You know, a lot of these guys have been working around the clock to get this going on, and so I'm very thankful for
Yeah,
their efforts.
Joe, we do appreciate those efforts, and those efforts included, a joint meeting yesterday afternoon on a Sunday afternoon too. So, thank you. All right, our last item is item number 7, discussion on what warrants an emergency meeting and requirements that must be met to hold one. Chuck, are you addressing this one?
I'll address that. We call this emergency meeting because there was an urgent necessity to extend the City of Canyon's emergency declaration that you had signed last Wednesday because it had a short expiration date on it. Generally speaking, if we can anticipate the need for a meeting, we're going to post it 72 hours in advance, if at all possible. The statute in the Open Meetings Act does give us the ability, under certain limited conditions, to call an emergency meeting. It's to address a reasonably unforeseeable situation, and it has a list of things. Epidemic is on that list, and that's why we're here today, because epidemic is listed. We've got not only a statewide epidemic, we've got a nationwide pandemic going on, so we were authorized to do that. But if anything comes up that is so unexpected, it requires immediate action. The legislature has amended the Open Meetings Act to allow us to post an agenda at least 1 hour in advance of the meeting and notify the news media about an emergency meeting and then hold that meeting. That was kind of in the wake of a hurricane that hit Houston. That was shortened from 2 hours to 1 hour. So we do have the ability to react quickly if the need arises. If the time permits and we can anticipate something is going to have to be acted on, then we can post an agenda 72 hours in advance. The law additionally allows us to supplement a regular meeting agenda with an emergency item with 1 hour posting.
Chuck, do you feel like we'll hold an emergency meeting if we change from orange to level red?
We will probably have to because of the nature of the implementation that we're going to be going through. So I think that will be an emergency meeting required with a 1 hour notice. Yes, sir.
I agree. We need to keep this body as up to date as possible on this because, as each of y'all know, things have even changed hour to hour at this point in time. When Gary and Cody and I were talking about speaking with the restaurants, we spoke with them like Tuesday, and we had planned it just 1 day out to give enough notice, and by the time we got to that meeting, things had changed drastically, and the message that we were putting out was not even the same as what we originally had for an intent. And so things are so fluid right now, we need to maintain that, and that's why we have the emergency meetings for that reason. So this body needs to be very up to date on what's happening in their city and with their city staff and the community, because everybody is being impacted at this point in time, yourselves included.
So fortunately, the legislature did give us a little bit of additional flexibility to react to these type of things. As Joe pointed out, the situation could change in 48 hours.
We'll play it by
All right.
ear, Mr. Mayor, as
Okay.
we go forward. We've heard even rumors about possibly Wednesday. We don't know at this point in time if we'll go to that status. I can say I do feel, that if the governor does indicate a shelter in place, that will prompt us to move to red. Even if we don't have additional cases at that time, we will move to red at that time.
And Joe, I think with that, I think, you know, we'll go in discussion with the city of Amarillo, because this is a joint, you know,
Correct.
joint document and all too. So we will have those discussions with city of Amarillo.
We are discussing, we are talking with multiple players at City of Amarillo daily. Myself, our staff included, we're talking with BSA. Communication is high on our list, and I don't think we can over-communicate at this point. Thank you all for coming together so quickly.
All right, thank you all. John, I guess could also ask any questions that have come up to the end of the meeting.
No questions at this point in time.
Okay. Well, with that, I would entertain another motion.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. We stand adjourned
5:13.
at 5:15.
Appreciate it.
Joe, did you hear the, thank you, man. Did a great job.
You don't know that.
Well, I do too. Because I saw you listening carefully, and even when two people were talking at the same time, which must be tough.
So many times.
It is a little bit. Also, we don't necessarily have words for that. I mean, yeah, when you're reading them.
My sister called from Dallas yesterday. City of Dallas issues its own.
The Dallas County.
Yeah. And so, essentially, over the next time we sit,
Now there
I'm
are.
confident all those cities have enough to react on their own. I think what he's doing is saying Houston, Dallas, San Antonio.
Right,
Yeah.
right, there was probably just.